Friedrich Nietzsche's master-slave morality is a central theme in many of his works, but it can still be applied to modern-day applications. So one way this theory can be looked at is by viewing the Quentin Tarantino thriller Django Unchained, starring Jamie Foxx and then Leonardo DiCaprio. So a scholar can identify this theory's modern presence by understanding Nietzsche's background, the storyline of Django Unchained, master morality, slave morality, and finally, where this theory occurs in the artifact of Django Unchained. This brings me to the research question of, should Django Unchained be viewed as an ethical film? Alright, now first we're going to go and talk about Friedrich Nietzsche. He, according to Wikipedia, he was born in Prussia in 1844 and died in 1900. And I know you guys are going to question that source with Wikipedia, but it's kind of funny because I went through to the sources and they actually cited this book particular for what his background was. So I thought that was really funny that Wikipedia got something right. Now, in the preface of The Birth of Tragedy, he wrote this during the Franco-Prussian conflict, and he had some very extreme views when it came to morals and ethical values. So shortly after he wrote The Birth of Tragedy, he published the second book in the sequence called The Genealogy of Morals, which leads to the master and slave morality, which is the theory that I will talk about in the Django Unchained movie. Alright, now, for those of you who haven't seen Django, I've probably seen it about 25, 30 times, so about 3 days of my life has been dedicated to this awesome movie. Now, Django Unchained was released Christmas Day 2012 according to the Internet Movie Database, and this motion picture was directed by Quentin Tarantino, and he is known for his thrillers and action movies and using a lot of violence. Now, the Internet Movie Database also talked about how revenge is a really big aspect of these films, and that's also tied into the master and slave morality, going from the slaves rebelling against the master. Now, Django Unchained revolves around a slave named Django and the bounty hunter who freed him, named Dr. King Schultz. And I found that kind of ironic that the white person that freed him was named Dr. King. Yeah. So this movie starts with Dr. King Schultz violently freeing Django from his current captors. Schultz is a German that moves to America and pretends to be a dentist, but he is actually a bounty hunter. So he seeks out criminals that have essentially been forgotten about in the eyes of the law and collects the bounties for them. So Schultz goes out of his way and searches for Django because Django came from a plantation where 3 of these men that have bounties over their heads were currently working at. And then after Django and Schultz work together to kill these 3 brothers at the plantation, an inseparable bond is formed between the two, and they make a partnership out of retrieving these bounties. Now, Dr. King Schultz becomes really fond of Django and learns about Django's wife, and Schultz agrees to help free Django's wife from a ruthless plantation owner at the end of the movie. Now, we can dive into the master morality, which is talked about in Nietzsche's Genealogy of Morals. Now, Nietzsche refers to master morality as the ideology that we deem as good, and that would revolve around the strong-willed, nobility, strength, and power. So that's the thing that we typically think of good, is if they have power, oh, that person must be good, or righteous, or holy. So going back to the feudalism times and the Renaissance, we'd always view the people with wealth and power as the ones that are obviously inherently good, because the poor masses can't do anything to make a difference, whereas the people with the nobility and the money have the control. This leads to the master morality. In essence, we only go through life with what we have learned to be truly good. And on page 160 of the Genealogy of Morals, Nietzsche states that the judgment of good does not originate with those to whom good has been done, but rather it was the good themselves, that is to say the noble, the mighty, the high-placed, and the high-minded, who decreed themselves in their actions to be good. So this is saying that just because they are in a higher position, they believe that their actions are righteous and holy. When it gets down to it, that from a slave's perspective, what they are doing might not be the best thing for the overall good of mankind. They're doing things that might benefit themselves, or they might feel like they're doing the righteous thing. In this case, master morality can be looked at the plantation owners and on the slaves that they run. While if they have a lineage of owning slaves, they might not be seeing that they're doing an unethical thing of holding these humans as slaves and working them ruthlessly. They just see it as, oh, these are laborers and this is how it has been done for so many years, so why is it so wrong? Now, the next portion of the master-slave morality is, of course, the slave morality. So that's the flip side of master morality. Slave morality is how the weaker party in a relationship views its suppressor. This is where the slave really questions the master's values, or if they're really doing something to benefit everyone, or if they think they're doing good when really it is unethical. The master may believe that their way of life is superior simply because they haven't seen it from the perspective of a slave, or they haven't been in their shoes. They don't see what it's like to be suppressed. Page 170 in the Genealogy of Morals states that slave ethics begins by saying no to an outsider. So this is where the slaves would be suppressed by a master, and you decide to rebel against it and saying this isn't right and this is unjust, in pointing out the flaws in the master's morals. By understanding these two concepts of slave and master morality, we can apply it to the film of Django Unchained. So the first scene where you can experience the slave morality is when Dr. King first frees Django. Django only responds when spoken to. The master of Django rebuts Schultz's questioning by stating, "Don't talk to him," as if he has total control over the slave. After a slight altercation, Django ends up being freed, and Dr. Schultz states that you can bury them 12 feet under and then follow the North Star. Any astronomers among you? Oh, of course not. So this is obviously talking down to the slaves. This is the master morality, thinking that they are uneducated because they are slaves, which could be partially true, then he ends up pointing out the North Star, and the slaves are freed. This exhibits that Schultz is still dominant by ordering the other freed slaves to completely rid their captors. The second scene where we can see Nietzsche's theory in action is when Django and Dr. Schultz go to the local town saloon. The saloon keeper says, "That N-word can't be in here." Schultz then discusses a possible bounty hunting deal with Django and says after he is done, he will receive his freedom plus $75. This makes you question Schultz's morals behind it. Is he truly a good man by offering Django this opportunity, or should he just simply freed the slaves? Because it seems to me that Dr. King Schultz is doing things out of getting money and that power thing instead of the actual ethics behind freeing the slaves. Now, the scene number 3 where we see this is where Django starts taking on the master morality. So most of the movie, he is known as the slave, or the one that is being suppressed. But after he finishes his first bounty and kills those 3 brothers, he partners with Schultz, and he rides a horse to the local plantation and is harassed by the owner. The owner says, "Don't treat him like an N-word, but don't treat him like a white man." So this is because the plantation owner recognizes that Django is more than a slave, but still isn't equal to him. So Django, being riding on a horse, he started getting that dominant theory, and he actually talks down to the other slaves and starts asking around about information on where his wife could be. And in the plantation owner's eyes, he is doing nothing morally wrong because he has a lineage that involves owning slaves and running the plantation. Now the final scene is where this master morality comes into Django, is when he frees his wife at the end of the movie. They ride off into the distance, and one can assume happily ever after. This is where Django truly takes on that master morality because he has succeeded in getting the woman of his dreams, and he is a free man in comparison to the rest of his African-American compadres. I believe that Django really struggles with this duality in the film, which is a concept that Nietzsche really brings into the genealogy of his work. He is torn between where he is from and where he is now. So he starts off as that slave and being completely oppressed, and now he received his freedom. So he has that master mentality of being the dominant man in the situation. So in conclusion, we can go back to the research question. Is Django Unchained a moral production? And my argument is that it truly is. It shows the evolution of the slave to the master morality, and I also do not see extreme violence directed towards those that were being oppressed, which would be the African-American slaves. There's, of course, graphic scenes, but a majority of the movie is about that underdog tale where Django comes, and in one scene, they actually kill an entire group of KKK members. Pretty epic scene. I suggest that you guys all watch that movie. Instead, those in power are the villains, the white villains. Now, Nietzsche's slave master morality theory does a good job at dissecting the characters and the acts in the piece. I also think that Tarantino did an excellent job of capturing what mentalities the characters would have had when this film was set. So it was set back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and I believe that he captured a good demographic of how the slave would feel, and then the slave going to the master morality. Thank you.